Dr. Kim Hannah walked through the bright corridors of Kepler Station, her tablet showing the day's schedule. 3 diplomatic meetings, 2 cultural briefings, and a dinner with the Centauri trade delegation. As the station's main human representative, she spent most of her time helping different alien species understand each other. It was work she loved. The station buzzed with activity. Tall, blue-skinned Centauri discussed shipping routes with insect-like Veltari merchants. Small, furry Kef delegates shared meals with crystalline beings whose names humans could barely pronounce. Hannah had spent 3 years on Kepler Station, and watching so many different species work together still filled her with wonder. Her assistant, a young Centauri named Velkos, approached with obvious concern. "Dr. Hannah, the Saurian delegation has arrived early. They are requesting an immediate meeting about the territorial agreements." Hannah nodded, checking her tablet. The Saurians were always difficult to work with. They were large reptilian beings who believed strongly in military power and dominance. Their hegemony controlled dozens of star systems through force rather than diplomacy. Still, they were part of the galactic community, and peaceful solutions were always worth pursuing. "Set up conference room 7, she said. "The larger space might help them feel more comfortable." The Saurian delegation entered the conference room like a military parade. 5 massive warriors in ceremonial armor flanked their leader, Commander Thakmer. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his dark green scales reflecting the room's lights. Cold yellow eyes surveyed the space with obvious displeasure. "Commander Thakmer," Hannah said, rising from her seat with a respectful bow. "Station, I hope your journey was comfortable." The commander ignored her greeting. "Human, we are here to finalize the territorial expansion agreements. The systems marked in our proposal will be transferred to hegemony control within 30 standard days." Hannah pulled up the holographic display, showing the contested systems. Red zones marked areas the Saurians wanted to claim. Several contained established colonies of peaceful species. "I've reviewed your proposal, Commander. However, there are some concerns about the existing populations in these systems." "Concerns?" Thakmer's voice carried a dangerous edge. "The Veltari have had settlements in the Kepler 7 system for over 2 centuries. The Kef colonies in the outer regions support nearly 1 million families. Perhaps we could explore alternative arrangements that allow for hegemony expansion without displacing these established communities." The room fell silent. Even the Saurian guards seemed to tense at their commander's growing anger. Thakmer stepped closer to the conference table, his massive form casting a shadow over the seated delegates. "Do you speak of alternatives, human? You question the hegemony's rightful claims. You forget your place in the natural order." Hannah remained calm, though she felt the tension building. "I'm simply suggesting that we look for solutions that benefit everyone. The galaxy is vast. Surely there are uninhabited systems that would serve the hegemony's needs equally well." Other delegates around the table watched nervously. The Centauri ambassador had gone pale. The Voltari representatives huddled together, their compound eyes reflecting fear. Everyone knew the Saurians' reputation for violence, but diplomatic immunity had always protected conference participants. Commander Thakmer's hand moved to his ceremonial armor, activating a device that began to hum with energy. "You need to learn about strength, human, about respect, about the consequences of challenging your betters." Commander Hannah said carefully, "I believe there may be a misunderstanding. I'm not challenging anyone. I'm trying to find a peaceful solution. That peace," Thakmer hissed, "exists only when the weak know their place." The device on his armor projected a beam of crackling energy that struck Hannah before she could react. Pain beyond anything she had ever experienced tore through her body. She collapsed to the floor, unable to scream, unable to think, aware only of agony that seemed to burn through every nerve. The alien delegates watched in horror. As the pain amplifier did its work, the device was designed to inflict maximum suffering while keeping the victim alive and conscious. It was used in Saurian religious ceremonies to demonstrate the dominance of their warrior class. Minutes passed like hours. Hannah's body convulsed. Helplessly as the energy coursed through her, the Centauri ambassador started to rise from his seat, but a Saurian guard's warning growl made him sit back down. The Velteri delegation hugged each other in terror. No one moved to help. "This is what happens," Thokmer announced to the room, "when lesser species forget their place. Let this be a lesson to all who witness it." The torture continued for what felt like an eternity. Hannah's vision blurred as the pain overwhelmed her system. Through the haze of agony, she could see the faces of the alien delegates she had worked with for years. Some looked away in shame. Others wept openly. Too frightened to intervene, when the device finally powered down, Dr. Kim Hannah lay still on the conference room floor. The woman who had spent her life building bridges between species, who had helped dozens of alien cultures understand and trust each other, was dead. Commander Thakmer deactivated his armor's weapon and straightened his ceremonial robes. The territorial agreements will be signed as proposed. Any objections? The room remained silent except for quiet sobbing from some delegates. "Excellent," the commander said. "The hegemony appreciates your cooperation." As the Saurian delegation filed out of the conference room, they left behind more than just a body. They had killed not just a person, but an idea, the belief that kindness and diplomacy could coexist with strength. What they had not realized was that they had also created something far more dangerous. They had given humanity a reason to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of when someone they cared about was taken from them. The message reached Earth's communication networks 36 hours after the incident. Official diplomatic channels carried dry reports about a regrettable loss of personnel during negotiations. But the real story came through different paths. Velko's. Hannah's Centauri assistant had been recording the meeting for translation purposes. The footage showed everything. Within hours of Hannah's death, copies of the recording began spreading through underground networks across the galaxy. Alien traders, sympathetic diplomats, and even some Saurian dissidents passed the data from ship to ship, station to station. On Luna Base, Lieutenant Park Jun was enjoying his monthly leave when his communication device chimed. The message came from his sister, civilian working on Mars. It contained only a video file and 3 words. They killed her. Jun watched the footage in his small quarters. The first viewing left him numb. The second made his hands shake. By the third time, he was memorizing every detail of the Saurian commander's face, his armor, his voice. Around him, other soldiers were receiving similar messages. The base grew unusually quiet as word spread. Dr. Lee Minho was preparing for bed in his research facility on Titan when his colleague called, "Minho, you need to see this. It's about Hannah." The two scientists had worked together years earlier, sharing research on alien biology. Hannah had always been the bridge between their technical work and practical diplomacy. After watching the recording, Minho sat in his lab for hours, staring at his collection of xenobiological samples. He had detailed files on dozens of species, including extensive data on Saurian physiology. Information he had gathered purely for scientific purposes suddenly felt much more important. Corporate executive. Choi Soo-jin received the news during a board meeting on Ceres Station. Her shipping company maintained trade routes throughout human and alien space, including several contracts with hegemony worlds. As the footage played on her personal device, her expression grew cold. "Cancel the meeting," she told her assistants. "I need to review our Saurian contracts immediately." Across human space, similar scenes played out. The news spread through family networks, professional associations, military channels, and corporate communications. But humanity's response was not what the galaxy expected. There were no angry crowds in the streets, no government officials demanding immediate military action, no diplomatic protests or economic sanctions. Instead, something much quieter and more dangerous began to happen. Ordinary humans started asking questions. Computer programmer Kung Haijin lived alone in a small apartment on Europa. She spent most of her time working on communication software for interstellar networks. After seeing the footage, she became very interested in Saurian computer systems. How did their networks function? What security protocols did they use? Could one hypothetically access their communication grids? Her research began as curiosity, but quickly became an obsession. Captain. Yoon Tae-young ran a small private security company that provided protection for civilian contractors in dangerous systems. Most of his employees were former military veterans who had served in various conflicts. When the news reached them, the veterans held a quiet meeting in their company's conference room. "Hannah helped my daughter get into the xenobiology program," said one former sergeant. "Wrote her a recommendation letter. She translated for my wife when we adopted our son from the Centauri refugees," added another. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it ended, Yoon had a list of volunteers for new security contracts and systems near hegemony space. Meanwhile, alien species who had witnessed Hannah's execution began receiving unexpected visitors. Human diplomats, researchers, and traders started appearing on their worlds, asking detailed questions about Saurian culture, military organization, and economic systems. The questions seemed academic at first. Humans had always been curious about other species, but the intensity and focus of the inquiries made some aliens uncomfortable. Ambassador Velfolk, a Centauri who had tried to help during the execution, found himself in lengthy conversations with human visitors. They wanted to know everything about Saurian society. How was their military structured? What resources did they depend on? Where were their key installations located? "Why do you need this information?" Velfolk finally asked during one such meeting. The human researcher, a quiet woman named Dr. Young Sora, smiled sadly. "We're trying to understand what happened to our friend. Knowledge helps with grief." But Velfolk noticed that Dr. Yang took very detailed notes, and her questions were remarkably specific for someone simply dealing with grief. On various human worlds, academic conferences began featuring unusual topics. Military historians suddenly showed great interest in Saurian battle tactics. Economists studied hegemony trade dependencies. Sociologists examined reptilian cultural hierarchies. The research was thorough, professional, and completely voluntary. No government agency coordinated it. No military organization directed it. Humans simply began learning everything they could about their friends' killers. Dr. Lee Minho published several papers on Saurian biology during this period. His work on reptilian nervous systems and pain receptors was praised as groundbreaking. Military contractors found his research particularly interesting, though Minho claimed to be motivated purely by scientific curiosity. Shipping companies across human space began discovering that routes through hegemony territory were becoming economically inefficient. The reasons varied: increased insurance costs, scheduling conflicts, maintenance issues, but the effect was the same. Trade with Saurian worlds started declining. Commander Thakmer and his superiors noticed none of these changes. The hegemonies. Leadership congratulated themselves on successfully intimidating the humans. They had shown strength, demonstrated dominance, and taught the galaxy a valuable lesson about respecting Saurian authority. What they failed to understand was that humans were very good at learning lessons. But sometimes the lesson they learned was not the one their teachers intended to teach. 6 months after Hannah's death, the preparation phase was nearly complete. Humanity had asked their questions, gathered their data, and made their plans. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you hurt someone that 6 billion humans considered family. The Saurians had wanted to teach about strength and respect. Soon they would receive a very thorough education on both topics. 6 months had passed since Hannah's death. To most observers, life had returned to normal. Human traders still visited alien worlds. Diplomats attended conferences, and scientists continued their research. The galaxy had moved on, and humanity seemed to have accepted their loss with typical resignation. But beneath the surface, something unprecedented was taking shape. Captain Yoon Tae-young's private security company had grown remarkably in recent months. What started as a small operation, protecting civilian contractors, had expanded into a network spanning dozens of systems. His employees, all former military veterans, had taken assignments in locations that seemed random to outside observers. Cultural exchange programs, Yoon explained to anyone who asked. His people were learning about alien societies, studying local customs, and building relationships with various species. The fact that many of these assignments happened to be near hegemony territory was simply coincidence. Sergeant Kim Daeho, had spent 4 months on a mining station just 3 jumps from the Saurian homeworld. Officially, he was providing security for human miners. Unofficially, he was mapping every supply route, communication relay, and military checkpoint in the region. His detailed reports went straight to Yoon's personal files. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Lee Minho had become something of a celebrity in xenobiological circles. His papers on alien physiology were being cited by researchers across human space. His latest work focused on Saurian neural pathways and how different species responded to various forms of stimulation. The pain receptors in reptilian species are fascinating, he explained to a colleague during a research conference. Their nervous systems can be manipulated in ways that would be impossible with mammalian biology. Applications for medical treatments are enormous. What he didn't mention was that the same research could be applied in very different ways. His detailed studies of Saurian anatomy included precise information about their vulnerabilities, their tolerance levels, and exactly how their bodies would react to specific types of damage. Corporate executive Choi Soo-jin had been equally busy. Her shipping company now coordinated with dozens of other human businesses, creating an informal network that spanned most of known space. The coordination had begun accidentally, as companies independently decided to reduce their exposure to Saurian markets. Risk management, she called it during board meetings. The hegemony has become increasingly unstable. It's simply good business to diversify our trade routes. The truth was more complex. Human businesses were quietly sharing information about Saurian supply chains, economic dependencies, and critical infrastructure. What looked like independent business decisions was actually a coordinated economic strategy designed to identify every pressure point in hegemony society. Meanwhile, programmer Kong Haijin had made remarkable progress in her study of alien computer systems. Her apartment had become a maze of servers, quantum processors, and communication equipment. Officially, she was developing translation software for interspecies commerce. Unofficially, she had spent months infiltrating Saurian networks. Their security is primitive, she told her online collaborators during encrypted conversations. They rely on physical barriers rather than digital protection. Once you're inside their network, you can access everything. Her team had grown too. Include programmers from across human space. They shared techniques, traded access codes, and slowly built a comprehensive map of hegemony digital infrastructure. Navigation systems, communication networks, financial databases, military logistics, all of it. It's vulnerable to someone who knew the right approaches. The alien species who had witnessed Hannah's death found themselves dealing with an unusual number of human visitors. The questions had become more specific over time, moving from general cultural inquiry to detailed technical information. Ambassador Velthok received Dr. Young Sora in his office once again. She had been visiting regularly for months, always asking about Saurian society and culture. Today's questions were different. I'm curious about their military structure, she said, reviewing her notes. How do they coordinate between different fleets? What happens if their command ships are damaged? Velthak felt uncomfortable. Dr. Yang, these questions seem very detailed for academic research. Understanding their organization helps us process. What happened? She replied. Knowledge brings closure. But Velthak had noticed that other humans were asking similar questions on other worlds. The pattern was becoming too obvious to ignore. On distant worlds, human tourists had become remarkably interested in Saurian military installations. They took photographs, asked innocent questions about local history, and carefully noted the locations of important facilities. Their behavior was perfectly legal and apparently harmless, but the cumulative effect was troubling. The Saurians themselves remained oblivious to these activities. Commander Thokmer had been promoted after his successful intimidation of the humans. He now held a position of significant authority within the hegemony military structure. Completely unaware that his personal information, daily routines, and travel schedules were being carefully documented by human intelligence networks. The humans learned their lesson, he told his subordinates during a strategy meeting. They understand strength now. Notice how quiet they've become since the incident. What Thokmar interpreted as submission was actually preparation. Across human space, ordinary citizens were contributing to an effort that had no official coordination but perfect focus. Scientists shared research, veterans provided tactical expertise, business leaders mapped economic vulnerabilities, programmers created digital weapons. The most remarkable aspect of the preparation was its voluntary nature. No government had ordered these activities, no military organization was directing the effort. Humans were simply doing what they did best, solving problems through cooperation and determination. Dr. Park Jimin, who had replaced Hannah as cultural liaison on Kepler Station, received regular reports from the growing network. The information flow was staggering. Every aspect of Saurian society was being analyzed, from their religious beliefs to their supply chains to their reproductive cycles. "Are we really going to do this?" his assistant asked during a private conversation. Jimin looked at the memorial plaque that now hung in the conference room where Hannah had died. "She believed in peace," he said quietly. "But peace requires justice, and justice requires strength." The preparation phase was nearly complete. Soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity stopped being diplomatic and started being efficient. The operation began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday. Across 47 star systems, humans who had been living quiet, ordinary lives for months suddenly revealed their true purpose. Sergeant Kim Dae-ho was having breakfast at the mining station cantina when his communication device buzzed with a simple message, "Remember Hannah?" He finished his meal, paid his bill, and walked calmly to the station's main communication array. The Saurian guards, who had grown used to seeing the friendly human security officer, barely looked up as he approached. 20 minutes later, the primary communication hub for 3 Saurian military sectors went completely dark. Similar scenes played out across hegemony space. Captain Yoon Tae-young's security consultants emerged from their cover positions like ghosts materializing from shadows. Supply depots that had operated for decades suddenly exploded. Military command centers lost power and communications simultaneously. Navigation beacons that guided Saurian fleets through dangerous space simply stopped working. The attacks were precise, efficient, and devastating. Every target had been carefully selected and studied for months. The humans knew exactly where to strike for maximum impact with minimum casualties to innocent aliens. Commander Thokmar was reviewing fleet deployment reports in his office when the first alerts began coming in. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Kepler Sector Command," his aide reported nervously. "Communication problems," Thokmar dismissed. "Have the technicians checked the relays?" But the reports kept coming. Lost communications, damaged facilities, missing supply ships. Within hours, it became clear that the hegemony was under systematic attack. "Who is responsible?" Thokmar demanded during an emergency meeting with other commanders. Nobody had an answer. There had been no declarations of war, no ultimatums, no enemy fleets detected on sensors. The attacks seemed to come from nowhere, carried out by invisible forces that struck and vanished. Meanwhile, the economic assault reached critical mass. Choi Soo-jin's network of human businesses had been quietly coordinating for months, and now their efforts showed devastating results. Supply ships bound for Saurian worlds were suddenly recalled due to contract disputes. Critical resources that the hegemony imported became unavailable overnight. Food shipments stopped arriving. Medical supplies ran short. Industrial materials needed for manufacturing simply disappeared from the market. What the Saurians had dismissed as minor trade fluctuations revealed itself as a comprehensive economic siege. "How is this possible?" demanded High Commander Victor during a crisis meeting. "We have contracts, agreements, legal obligations. The humans are honoring their contracts," his economic advisor explained miserably. "They're simply choosing not to renew them. They're offering other suppliers better terms to redirect their shipments." In the digital realm, Kong Haijin's network unleashed chaos across Saurian computer systems. Years of patient infiltration paid off as critical infrastructure began failing simultaneously. Navigation computers on military ships started providing incorrect coordinates. Financial networks crashed, wiping out economic records. Communication systems that had worked for centuries suddenly couldn't connect calls. "It's like they knew our systems better than we do," a Saurian technician reported to his superiors. "Every vulnerability is being exploited perfectly. The humans weren't finished." Dr. Lee Minho's research had identified something crucial about Saurian society that went beyond military or economic targets. Like many reptilian species, the Saurians concentrated their breeding activities on specialized worlds where eggs were laid in massive communal hatcheries. These breeding worlds represented the future of their entire species. Human fleets appeared around each breeding planet simultaneously. The ships were not military vessels but converted civilian craft, cargo haulers, and private security vessels. They carried no weapons of mass destruction, made no threats of bombardment. They simply surrounded the planets and waited. The message was clear and terrifying: surrender, or watch your species slowly die out. High Commander Vector stared at the tactical display showing human ships around their most sacred worlds. "They're not attacking. They're not even threatening to attack. They're just ... there." "What do they want?" asked another commander. The answer came through every communication channel simultaneously. Simple message broadcast across hegemony. Space. Justice for Dr. Kim Hanna. Surrender Commander Thakmer and his accomplices for trial. Withdraw all territorial claims. Submit to galactic oversight of your military activities. You have 72 hours. Thakmer himself was no longer available to participate in these decisions. Human operatives had been tracking him for months, studying his routines, mapping his security, and waiting for the right moment. When the operation began, he found himself hunted across the galaxy by teams that seemed to know his every move before he made it. His ship had been sabotaged before he could escape. His safe houses had been compromised. His allies had mysteriously become unavailable. Every escape route had been blocked by humans, who appeared to have unlimited resources and perfect intelligence. When human operatives finally cornered him on a remote asteroid mining facility, Thakmer expected to face soldiers. Instead, he found himself confronting civilians. Dr. Lee Min-ho led the team, carrying a device that looked remarkably similar to the pain amplifier that had killed Hannah. "You wanted to teach us about strength," Lee said quietly as his team prepared their equipment. "We're here to return the lesson." The device in Lee's hands was an improved version of Saurian technology, modified based on months of research into reptilian neurology. It was more precise, more efficient, and capable of extending suffering far longer than any primitive Saurian equipment. "Please," Thakmer begged, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "I was following orders. I was maintaining discipline." "No. Don't understand our culture. We understand it perfectly," Lee replied. "That's why we know exactly how to make this hurt." As Thakmer's screams echoed through the mining facility, similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Every Saurian involved in Hannah's execution was being systematically hunted down and captured. The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as the species they had considered gentle idealists systematically dismantled a major military power with terrifying efficiency. The surrender ceremony took place on Kepler Station, in the same conference room where Dr. Kim Hanna had died 8 months earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone present. High Commander Vector sat at the same table where Hanna had once advocated for peaceful solutions. His once-proud military uniform looked wrinkled and worn. The arrogant reptilian leader who had ruled through fear now trembled as he signed document after document, each one stripping away another piece of Saurian power. Dr. Park Jimin, Hanna's replacement, watched from across the table with calm satisfaction. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of alien species who had witnessed the incredible efficiency of human retribution. Their faces showed a mixture of relief and barely concealed terror. The Saurian hegemony formally surrenders all territorial claims made in the past 5 years, Vector read from the treaty. His voice cracked with each word. "We agree to return all occupied worlds to their original inhabitants within 90 standard days." Ambassador Velthak, the Centauri who had tried to help Hanna, observed the proceedings with mixed emotions. Justice was being served, but the demonstration of human capability had shaken his understanding of the galaxy's power structure. Furthermore, Victor continued, we submit to ongoing oversight by the Galactic Peace Council. All military activities will require prior approval. Our fleet size will be reduced by 60%. The economic terms were equally devastating. War reparations would be paid to dozens of species that had suffered under Saurian aggression. Trade agreements would be renegotiated to favor the victims, rather than the aggressors. The hegemony's economy would be rebuilt under strict international supervision, but the most significant clause dealt with individual accountability. All personnel involved in the execution of Dr. Kim Hanna will be transferred to human custody for trial and punishment. Victor read, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Thokmer was no longer present to hear his fate. Dr. Lee Minho and his team had spent 3 days demonstrating the improved pain amplifier technology. The former commander had experienced exactly the same suffering he had inflicted on Hanna, extended over a much longer period thanks to human scientific improvements. When Thokmar finally died, his last words were an apology to a human who would never hear it. The galaxy reeled from what they had witnessed. In less than 4 weeks, humanity had dismantled a major military power without firing a single shot in traditional warfare. They had demonstrated economic, technological, and strategic capabilities that no one had suspected. More disturbing was the revelation that this entire operation had been coordinated by civilians. No human government had officially authorized the action. No military high command had directed the strategy. Ordinary citizens had simply decided that justice needed to be served and had made it happen. How is this possible? Asek Theri, ambassador from the Insectoid Hive Collective, during a private meeting with other alien leaders. We underestimated them completely, replied Velfok. We saw their diplomacy, their kindness, their desire for peace, and we assumed these were signs of weakness. We never realized they were choices made by a species strong enough to choose differently. Captain Yoon Tai-young was demobilizing his security network, sending veterans back to their normal lives. The operation was complete, and there was no need to maintain the infrastructure they had built. The knowledge remained. The capability remained. The willingness to use both remained. Corporate executive Choi Soo-jin resumed normal trade operations. But with a new understanding among human businesses, they had proven they could coordinate economic warfare with devastating effectiveness. Capability would not be forgotten. Programmer Kang Haijin quietly archived her infiltration tools and returned to legitimate software development. But she maintained contact with her network of collaborators. The digital weapons they had created were too valuable to simply discard. Dr. Lee Minho published several papers about his medical research during the Saurian crisis. His work on pain amplification technology was praised by the scientific community for its potential therapeutic applications. The military applications remained unspoken but well understood. A memorial garden was established around Hannah's plaque in the Kepler Station conference room. It became an unexpected pilgrimage site, visited not just by humans, but by representatives from dozens of alien species. They came to pay respects to a woman who had died advocating for peace, and to remember the lesson her death had taught the galaxy. The inscription on her memorial was simple. She believed in peace. We ensured peace would believe in her. In the months that followed, humanity returned to their diplomatic posts, research stations, and peaceful endeavors throughout the galaxy. But something fundamental had changed in how other species viewed them. When human ambassadors spoke about cooperation and tolerance, alien leaders listened with newfound respect. When human scientists requested access to research data, the requests were approved without delay. When human merchants proposed trade agreements, the terms were accepted without negotiation. The galaxy had learned that humans possessed 2 essential qualities that made them uniquely dangerous: absolute loyalty to each other and the ability to coordinate complex operations without central authority. Dr. Park Jimin stood in the memorial garden a year later, surrounded by alien diplomats attending a peace conference. Young Veltari approached him nervously. Dr. Park, the insect-like being said through its translator, how can we ensure that such violence never happens again? Jimin smiled with the same gentle expression that Hannah had worn while building bridges between species. It's simple, he replied, "Remember that our kindness is a choice, not a weakness. And remember that we choose to be kind because we're strong enough to afford compassion." The alien delegates' compound eyes reflected understanding. The humans had shown mercy not because they were weak, but because they were powerful enough to choose when to be merciful. They had hurt one soul and discovered what it meant to face a galaxy of enemies united by love for that single person. The lesson would not be forgotten.